Legendary Sickos is back. Myself, Erik Beinfor, and Pat Kerrane with the first show of 2024 NFL best ball season. And today we are breaking down the overall landscape, the overall market in fantasy football. What do you need to know? Where are the spots where the running backs are best, where the wide receivers are best? How can we construct our teams to take advantage of the areas that we see as strengths, weaknesses, and everything there in between in the best ball market for 2024? Let's do it. All right, Pat, we're back. I'm excited. It has been already a whirlwind of a 2020. I can't believe this. You know, with Legendary Upside, you've got your people been drafting since like the Super Bowl for 2024, as have the Spike Week Sickos. But for anybody new, obviously this is kind of a kickoff of one of my favorite shows and a generally weekly show that we'll do kind of the rest of the summer here, breaking down all the different strategic angles across specifically best ball, but generally applicable to fantasy football. And we are going to start today with the overall market, because I think before we dive into whatever our next Sam Howell debate is, whatever our next, Rashad Bateman line, who is the new Rashad Bateman of this season?
Before we get into the cursed last wide receiver you can take.
Yes, exactly. Who is my Damian Harris and Rashad Penny that are stone cold zeros for the whole season? Before we can get into all of that stuff, I think we need to understand what this market is. And I particularly find this year to be maybe the most interesting I can remember, at least since, Underdog and DraftKings Best Ball and everything have been around. I don't know how you feel, but this year feels kind of like the most fun, the biggest shakeups.
Yeah, it's a really interesting year. I think it's in some ways a continuation of a trend that we've seen for the last several years. And I think there's a reason this trend is continuing is because this is a more efficient ADP environment than we've probably had at wide receiver and running back specifically. Last year we kind of constantly heard this is too high for the wide receiver. The wide receivers are going too early. It's just too much. We've jumped the shark. It's gone too far. And then wide receiver heavy teams win stuff and running back heavy teams lose stuff. Like that's generally how, and this is not necessarily about your starts. Like it's not that you can't take a running back in the first round or, my team had running back, and then I attacked wide receiver heavily after that. Like it also wasn't a particularly strong team in the regular season. It finished second in its spot. So it wasn't, I would say, a super team. It did well in the playoffs. In that year, wide receiver, like zero running back teams did extremely well. So I think it's not that like zero running back is destined to be, what you had to have this year. It could very well be that a different construction is what wins it. But I do think that whatever team wins it is likely to have attacked wide receiver depth early in the draft. I think, and the reason I think that this trend is continuing this way is that when you try to swim upstream against it, you're really behind the eight ball. It's very difficult to do. In the past, when running backs got kind of snapped up, it was somewhat difficult to go zero running back, and people would really push back on zero running back because it didn't feel comfy. Right now it feels comfy. Now it's like go zero running back, take Aaron Jones in the 7th round as your running back one. That seems great, right? But it used to be like in the 7th round, you're talking already about kind of like backups. Like Pete and I, we drafted Alvin Kamara his rookie year as a big zero running back hit. He was the 3rd running back on the Saints as a rookie who no one was particularly excited about. And that's like you're getting him in like the 10th round, and that's like what you have to, that you're praying that guy hits kind of thing. It definitely made you a lot more nervous. And it was harder to talk people into doing. But the thing about the running backs going later is that now there's this pocket of running backs. If you've been drafting, you know exactly what this is. I mean, literally, it's just a giant wall of green that hits your available players.
Christian
around
Watson, DeAndre Hopkins, and a bunch of running backs.
It's exactly. So you're either going to have 80% Christian Watson, or you're drafting running backs in like the
80% of the wide receiver with one functional hamstring sounds like a miserable best ball experience for me.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you, with that pocket, like you can just attack that pocket, end up with what feel to me, as someone who's been doing zero running back for years, like really, really strong running back rooms. And now you have the chance to beat the early running back drafters twice, where you have way better wide receivers than them, and potentially you have better running backs than them because it's such a chaotic position. So that's I think the big macro trend is that we're seeing the wide receivers get pushed up even more. Now, maybe what could happen is more casual drafters come in, this gets disrupted, and it actually starts to get like a little less easy to go zero running back. And we actually do want to start taking some of the running backs early, because now Joe Mixon isn't in the 6th, he's in the 3rd, and we're not taking him there, but you can't get him there after 5 straight wide receivers or whatever. So I actually, in some ways, I wonder if we go a little less zero running back as the running backs move up, which they probably do. But that's the biggest thing, I think, is that, to me, this is a self-reinforcing trend, that the higher the wide receivers go, the more we need to make sure we are attacking the wide receivers early before they dry up, because you can't get that later. You can get running backs later. You always have been able to get running backs later, and that's why zero running back is continuing to work.
It reminds me of a bunch of different things. Well, first, it's been 3 years now, at least 2, maybe 3 years ago now, that if you're just new to best ball, there was an episode of Ship Chasing, which I was lucky enough to be on. Like, I don't even think
that was 2021. That was 2021, I think.
I don't even think SpikeWeek.com existed. I think it was still like underneath the Roto Grinders umbrella, and I was using my AirPods as my microphone. And, like, this is very early stages of all of this stuff. But I think similarly as you guys do from a strategy perspective. And I also just think approaching these games specifically, like why this market conversation is so important, is because I know it feels like a prediction game, like best ball. It's like pick the best players and pick the right, and who's the best RB2 and which guy is going in the 12th round, who ends up in the 2nd round last. And like some of that stuff is like important directionally, but really it's just like a big strategy game. What can I do against tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of other teams that are maybe being utilized not enough, right? Where is the market? What situations is the market like making a big stand on this team stinks or this team's awesome, and I can take a bet against that? And like, how often do I take that bet? And it's kind of all those little strategy pieces that are really not that much about like my opinion. Honestly, it's none of my opinion. It's analyzing what I think is going on in the market and what my opponents are doing. But the big one for this year to me is really you outlined it perfectly, but also I would trickle it down even away from the running backs to wide receiver firepower.
Yeah. That's why this is important. It's not really about the running backs.
Yeah. It went from, we defined every strategy around running backs.
Yeah.
And we still do, which I understand because it's really easy to understand. But the crux of it went from how uncomfortable am I willing to get with my running backs to your zero, right? Am I willing to take Alvin Kamara as my running back 1 on a team, when there's 45 running backs that are off the board already by that point, to now I can have great running backs.
Now I can have Alvin Kamara as my running back 1, and he's the clear starter.
With 5 superstar wide receivers, Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews. I can have all of them and Alvin Kamara. So it's less about the running backs, and it's entirely about, when I leave the draft, did my team have enough wide receiver firepower, right? Yeah. And I'm also not so bad at the other positions, which again, running back, I've never left the draft. I'm drafting only 0 running back teams right now, personally. We don't need to get into that right now, but that's my plan of attack for right now. And I've never left a room where I'm like, oh my God, those running backs are terrible. Now, other people would look at them probably and say, Zach Moss, RB1, I like Chase Brown better or whatever. And that's fine. But it all boils down to when I get done, because even if I draft a 0 running back team right now, I'll leave the draft sometimes and I'm like, oh man, wide receiver, it got pretty hairy there. Like I might have 3 I really like. The 4th could get a little sketchy. And then the 5th is like a rookie who I don't even know is ever going to touch the field type of a situation, because the market has just changed so much. So it all boils down to the wide receiver firepower. I do have to do some quick housekeeping, because speaking of firepower, I genuinely believe that if you want the firepower to like win your drafts and do a lot of things we'll talk about here, there's really 2 things that you should do. 1, subscribe to Legendary Upside. And if you are a subscriber to Legendary Upside, you can get 40% off of any Spike Week product. Our big thing is our tools. We have 2 main tools: the Draft Hacker, which is an overlay that lays onto your screen while you're drafting. If you've watched any of our Spike Week shows, you will see them in action while we are doing the drafts. And then we have what we call Draft IQ, which is kind of a portfolio analyzer, which I use like every single day. Once I, draft a day, I send my teams over to Draft IQ, and I'm looking at it to just see like, I keep taking CeeDee Lamb with Nico Collins or whatever. And it's like, I want every CeeDee Lamb team to be Nico Collins? Probably not, right? Or I have no Jag stacks. Why do I have no Jag stacks? I like the Jags. And so there's tons of things that you can do with these tools, and you can get 40% off of them if you are a subscriber to Legendary Upside. And I think the combination of kind of all of it is like, it can supercharge your best ball, because you're going to get the best advice plus some content and additional content and tools with Pat. And we'll bring you some tools that you can specifically use in your drafts and over your portfolio to get a huge, huge edge.
Yeah, I'm glad we remembered to do the plug up top.
4 hours from now would be a little bit of a less time, when we reach the end of. I did have somebody.
I'll also note.
Sorry.
Go
ahead.
I'll just also note that Legendary Upside, we have a promo right now where, and this is eventually not going to be $50. We're going to drop this. So this is a good time to sign up for Legendary Upside and get $50 off. $50 added to your Underdog account, $50 Underdog credit. Sign up at legendaryupside.com, and then right at the top of the site, perk/Discord access right there. You got to fill out a form to give me your Underdog username so I can send it over so you can get the credit. And we're also doing a $25 renewal credit. So renew. If I already have your username from last year, if you got a $50 credit, then I have your username because that's how you got it. And just renew your yearly subscription. This is all for yearly subscriptions, by the way. And you'll get $25 for renewing. You can also email me at legendaryupside@gmail.com if you're not finding the form to fill out your username.
I'm so glad you said that, because I'm waiting on a couple of things behind the scenes to announce, but there's really no reason I can't, and it's the perfect segue into this. So you sign up for legendaryupside.com, you get all of that free stuff, you get 40% off Spike Week, and when you sign up for Spike Week, we're about to launch free money that you're going to get on a different site. So you can just
wow. Okay.
Drafters.com. Drafters Fantasy is a good partner of ours. Of course, Underdog. We all love Underdog. We are partnering with Drafters Fantasy. So anyone who purchases the tools, which you can get 40% off, is going to get a free ticket to their NFL Best Ball Championship on Drafters. So you can get, what is that, $65? So you get 40% off Spike Week, $65 to play on the sites, and of course all the content and everything that comes with it. So check that out and just use promo code LEGUP on Spike Week to get that rolling. All right, back to the market. We talked about the wide receiver firepower thing. I want to talk a little bit about just some continued more like kind of high level how we're processing the market. You really broke it down really well, but something we didn't talk about is a little bit more of the nuts and bolts. Like, we didn't talk about quarterbacks. We didn't talk about tight ends. We talked about that pocket of running backs. We totally agree. And we'll get to more on that later. And we talked about the wide receiver firepower thing, but how do you so far in your drafts have like the quarterback and tight end part of it? Because in a vacuum, those guys seem generally pretty well priced to me. Elite guys, specifically at the position, with a few punt guys I don't hate. And so I feel all right about those two positions. But again, it goes back to the wide receiver firepower thing. If I want to be looking at the running backs, in a certain pocket, when do I dip my toes into the quarterback thing? How do you think they fit into the overall market?
Yeah, and I think your point about this really being about wide receiver firepower is essential. That is what we need to be thinking about, because there are other temptations in these early rounds beyond running back If you draft like us, maybe they're a lot more tempting than the running backs. But you can't go like, if you go Breece Hall, who I'm still taking, I'm happy to take some of these high upside running backs in the first couple rounds still. So let's say I go Breece Hall, then I grab a wide receiver in the second rounds. Then I take Josh Allen. Okay. Then I get, another wide receiver, and then I grab Dalton Kincaid. I'm pretty behind. I've got 2 wide receivers through 5 rounds. I've got a nice Josh Allen stack. Now you can potentially dig out of this because Allen's wide receivers, Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, they all go after that range. And so potentially, you can do it that way. But like, I do think you probably really wish you had Amon-Ra instead of Breece on that team.
Right.
Or, yeah, I mean, that's probably what you would. That's the lever you would. If you could just flip that to an Amon-Ra team, you would do it right away. I think, because it's going to be much more difficult to find that kind of wide receiver hit compared to someone who can maybe keep you close to Breece if he doesn't have a legendary season. And I think that's like what you have to be thinking through. Now, I do want to be stacking up Josh Allen though, you just think about like his price compared to last year, how much cheaper he is, but he's still like, we had Sacrilegious had an article on the site talking about Sortino ratio as a metric where you're looking at a floor and ceiling, and Josh Allen delivers that more than anybody else. You get the ceiling, and he hits your lineup every week. Now that's very powerful. It allows you to wait on quarterback 2 a long time, and to get a discount on him when he's like very stackable later. I think you want to be doing that, but the idea here, I think, is that ultimately taking that wide receiver when it's like a tie, it keeps you flexible. It allows you to kind of do stuff later. Like you only have so many detours that you can take, to use kind of a ship chasing idea, the idea of taking detours away from wide receiver. You really only have probably 2 of those in the first 5 rounds. I mean, you could look, if you want to do what I just said, go Breece, wide receiver, Allen, wide receiver, Kincaid. I mean, I'll probably try that out. I don't know if it's going to work, but I think it like that, like that's like kind of like radical and kind of departing from the market in ways that make me nervous. You're probably you need to understand at least that you're like behind at wide receiver at that point. But anyway, the tight ends and the quarterbacks, I think, are pretty well priced in these early rounds. And I think probably the tight ends even more so than the quarterbacks, where you're getting, the tight end 1 in the 3rd round. You're getting Travis Kelce often in the 4th round. Trey McBride is a good pick. I think Mark Andrews is a great pick. I think Kincaid is a good pick. I think Pitts is a good pick.
Yep.
I think Kittle's a great pick. There's like, you kind of go on and on. I think Evan Ingram's a good pick.
Yep.
There's really no tight ends that I think are overpriced in the early rounds. And so one of the reasons to not take a running back, if you're kind of thinking about it, is that spot probably boxes you out of a tight end, or it boxes you out of tight end and feeling good about wide receiver, which is, to me, the fundamental layer. Come out of those early rounds feeling good about wide receiver is priority 1.
Yeah, there's never a case of like nothing works this way where it's like a straight list of this is priority number 1. This is right. Like I check this box and then I check this box. But I would say if I'm prioritizing the things, like you said, after X amount of rounds, the wide receiver firepower is the one I'm always going to go back to. Will I have a draft where I don't feel like I haven't? Will I try things? To your point, yeah. You don't figure out what you like in drafts unless you try it, right? If I spend every single draft I drafted the same way, how do I know I don't like something else? Or I try that team that you just mentioned. If it turns out you actually like it, I may not agree personally, but there's nothing that doesn't mean
it is at least correlated, right? You're like, at least like the Samuel and like these guys probably aren't hitting, but like if they do hit, then Allen was like the smashiest smash in the 3rd round. If like Keon Coleman's a baller, so yeah, at least there's like a path.
100%, and we'll probably get into that on a future show. I push back on a lot of things I've seen a little bit lately where it's very binary. I'm seeing a lot of like very binary assessment of this is good and this is bad, or this is right and this is wrong. And like what you just outlined is like really not of interest to me and how I want to build my teams. But I can see the path to it winning. And so if somebody flipped over, sent me, we have a draft reviews channel in our Discord. If someone tagged me and said, "What do you think about this Brees, whatever," right? Brees, Nico, Allen, Kincaid, Keenan Allen, or something, I'm just making up, whatever. They sent it to me and they filled it out. And, they went 9 wide receivers. They like them, right? They stuck to the 2 at the onesies because they took those elite guys so that they could get the extra wide receivers. I'd be like, yeah, looks good. You did a good job. You drafted a good team. I'm never going to draft that, but I can see why someone else would. And so I do get a little frustrated sometimes when people are like, no, you can't draft. You cannot do that. And it's like, it doesn't really work that way. As long as there's a path. Can I tell you a story about how that Josh Allen team wins the whole goddamn thing? Absolutely, I can. Do I want to draft it? Not necessarily, but that doesn't mean it's right or wrong.
I kind of do. The thing to me is that
I just joined a draft. If you would like to,
literally am in
he's
that
probably
draft
in a BBM. Yeah.
Don't snipe me, bro. The thing about that team is like it really comes down that start. It just boxes you into you don't have any flexibility left. You don't have any flexibility left. Like you have a running back fall to you. You have Josh Jacobs falls to you in like round 7. Sorry, you can't take him. You can't take him. It's over. You won't be able to dig out at that. You've kind of put yourself in a position where there's one path to you surviving it, and it's just like hammering wide receiver and finding that wide receiver firepower that other people, were missing in those kind of like you need Cortland Sutton, you need Tyler Lockett, you need Curtis Samuel, like you need those guys that we're not super excited about, but that are probably capable of helping you fill out a less sexy group of wide receivers. But if you like skip those guys because you really like Chase Brown, who both of us like, I think that's bad. Like you're leaning on Brees. Brees is the dude. Right. Brees is the dude because you're much better off having taken Brees than Amon-Ra on this team, right? Otherwise, why?
Right.
Why
that's the bet you made.
That's the bet you made. So it better be like Brees and a bunch of random guys. Maybe you could throw in like one running back in that. But I mean, when would I throw in my running back too? When I felt like wide receiver wasn't like a raging fire anymore. That's when I would throw out. That's when running back 2 becomes an option again.
And then the other thing that was really sticking out to me when you're saying that is it can be an easy trap to fall into, like just using the Josh Allen example. But so I take the early running back, I take the elite quarterback. And even I like the appeal that you outlined. I think it's very appealing to say, well, I know I got Keon, Samuel, and Shakir in my back pocket. Like I think that's a feature of certainly not a bug. That's a feature, but it can become a bug I think it should be a perk of drafting Josh Allen, not a pillar, if that makes sense. I don't want to go in and say, well, I can take Josh Allen and not worry so much about my wide receiver firepower because I got Curtis. I got his wide receiver 1 later. I got his wide receiver 2 later. And that's kind of a fallacy. And I mean, did anybody watch the Chiefs last year? Like if you did this with Patrick Mahomes,
it
did not go great. I mean, I know Rashi came on, but you didn't want to be like,
but Rashi, he's your wide receiver 4. That probably didn't work.
Yeah, you still needed a lot, and he was good for his price, and he's certainly. Again, I don't want to get into all the mischief he's getting himself into, but he was a good football player and a big hit for fantasy. He wasn't like Puka or Tank when he was playing. He certainly wasn't Kyron Williams. He wasn't Achane or Mostert. He wasn't that level of hit to where it was like, oh shit, I just dominated everybody because I took.
He was a classic rookie wide receiver hit where he down the stretch was one of the guys you really wanted.
Yes, 100%.
Perfect wide receiver 5, like an ideal wide receiver 5.
And so that's a perk. Is like I might have Rashi in there, right? If I do this Mahomes detour, but I don't want it to be like I feel good about my lack of wide receiver firepower because MVS goes later and Rashi goes later and Kadarius Toney goes later and Sky Moore goes later because you're betting on and I don't think the Bills are bad players. I don't think all those guys were bad players, but you're betting on historically not great bets to like be a pillar of your team
for the most important position.
At the most important position, at the position the market has decided is price through the roof, which we agree with. I cannot go to battle every week, certainly not, 3 straight playoff weeks, needing Curtis Samuel to smash. Not just like, this is also the difference, not just be usable. You can get there by having 10 wide receivers, you bounce around some usable weeks, you advance out of your league. That's fine. You need the firepower for the playoff weeks because you need to finish, 1 of 16 and then 1 of 550 or whatever in week 17. You're just not getting that when you don't have the firepower.
Yeah, it's unlikely. I mean, you can find a Puka or whatever. And that makes a big difference. If there's a Puka, you want to find him for sure. But yeah, I mean, I think to your point about this being a strategy game, like we're trying to put together as many teams that are really live to finish first in this tournament. And, the way to do that, I think, is by understanding kind of when you walk into a room, what are the paths to being able, what are the most likely paths to walking out of the room with a team that's really live to win the tournament. And like, you can build any way you want to if you know you're going to hit Puka, Kyron, Tank Dell, at the end of the draft.
And DM me because I would like to know how to hit those guys every year. That would be
exactly.
Sweet.
We don't know. We don't know. Like some of those teams hopefully will have those types of hits on them, but that's kind of out of our control to, even if we're like really good at the late round pick selection. It's just so much variance, so much luck there. I mean, Tank got hurt. Like Tank was the guy and then he gets hurt. So, it's like, even if you're right, you might not be right. So it's just like navigating the landscape is the way to just like up your odds of putting together a team every single time of like, yes, can you swim against? You can. I mean, it's possible to swim upstream against this. It's just really hard. It's just really hard. And it's much easier to go with the flow at wide receiver. And then I think do some other stuff. I mean, to me, you go with the flow at wide receiver. Ben Gretsch has been kind of hammering this. He wants, I'm actually wondering if like I'm like slightly less of a wide receiver bro than some of my friends, because like he's like 4 straight wide receivers and 2 tight ends. And I'm like, I'm going 3 and then a tight end. 4, I think part of it is that I want to take like Kelsey and some of these guys who go a little earlier. But I like the general idea of wide receivers first, then get your tight ends. It makes a lot of sense to me in this ADP environment. Like these tight ends, I would say is probably the next big feature of like the market right now is that you can, the fact that you're getting Sam Laporta in the 3rd round, Travis Kelce in the 4th round, and then you've got all these other elite tight end. Like Mark Andrews has been an elite tight end for several seasons. He remains an elite tight end, in my opinion. He is, at the very worst, the 1B on his team in terms of target earning. And it's also a team that was more aggressive than they've really ever been with Lamar Jackson, but happened to have an elite defense last year. Defense is pretty difficult to predict year over year. This offense could be, much more willing to get into shootouts than we've historically seen. Pass attempts could be a bit up here compared to any year in the Lamar Jackson era, because of, I think, some signal that we got last year that people aren't really looking at. Like, think of that Lions game, right? They come on, they put it on the Lions. The Lions are dead. They're dead. They can't possibly come back against the Ravens defense. But like, what if the Ravens defense wasn't elite? The Ravens last year would have been amazing.
We saw this. Lamar just got hurt as well that year. It was the Tyler Huntley year.
Yeah, the Tyler Huntley
where
year.
he was starting down the stretch when Mark Andrews was a tight end 1 overall and set the world ablaze. He was the highest owned player in the Best Ball Mania finals. Mark Andrews was on like 65% of teams. I don't know the exact number offhand, but it's legitimately like that high. He was a 6th round pick or whatever. He dunked on every other tight end.
4th, 5th, I think.
Yeah. He was the smash of all smashes, and then he was doing it down the stretch as well. But it's not only because he's awesome. It's not only because, he's a superstar in real life and, lack of target competition, which we like to do all that analysis, and it's fine. But it's exactly what you said. The historically awesome Ravens defense collapsed and they were starting a freaking XFL secondary, dude. If you played DFS, all you did every week for like the last month and a half of the season was say, who are the Ravens playing? Because I'm going to stack their pass game against them, and Mark Andrews on the bring back. And it was a cheat code because Tyler Huntley's throwing 40 something passes because they got to play catch up. You know, it was a little bit of the inverse of what you're saying here, but it's the same idea where if the defense is not as good, so we see the floor, which is awesome. He's awesome and he's good for fantasy. The ceiling is, oh my God, scorched earth. Mark Andrews dropping 30 for multiple weeks in a row.
Yeah, and then we are talking about next December. You know, like the defense could start out pretty good, and you know, it's depth is really difficult to have in the NFL, and so you know, by the winter, the defense might not be as good. It's at least possible. I mean, this is half PPR points. In week 15, he had 30.6 half PPR points and then 22.5 in week 16. And basically, like, it was kind of nuts if you got to the final without him because you're getting in half PPR, you're getting a 30 burger at tight end. Like, that's going to advance a lot of teams.
Pete and I got Kyle Pitts through. We didn't have Mark Andrews. We got Kyle Pitts into that final with that Mark Andrews. I still don't know how that happened.
Man. He had 10 catches, 136 yards, 2 touchdowns, followed up with 8 catches, 125 yards, and a touchdown. I do think that there's like my thing with tight end, if there's any position or any spot where I'm like kind of like, you know, one of the age doesn't matter because normally I'm very like ageist, but at tight end, I'm just like, there's basically a handful of guys in the league who are playing a different position than everyone else. And my general feeling is that like, those guys you just take those guys like, and they continue to do it year after year because they're getting like their whole deal is that they can get open over the middle of the field and they're huge and they can block guys. And like, no one else is going to be able to like, they have this giant moat for their job because no one else has those combination of traits on that team. And it ages actually pretty well. It seems like. You know, Gronk had a bunch of injuries, but he actually still aged pretty well. Yeah. You know,
he looked like shit, but he was putting up numbers and catching passes and scoring touchdowns.
Yeah. Tony Gonzalez played deep into his career. Like Travis Kelce's like super old already.
Antonio Gates looked like he needed a walker and he was still scoring like 8 touchdowns by the end, you know?
Yeah. So, I mean, like I am not normally of the, you know, in this mindset, but like when a guy has done it, like Andrews has done it, he's got to show me that like he's done, you know, and by the way, he's turning 29 in September. So like, he's not even that old. This dude's like,
I wish I was 29.
Yeah. I wish I was 29. That'd be awesome. Yeah. This guy is like still by tight end standards, like still very much in his prime. So we're getting a guy in his prime tied to Lamar Jackson with an offensive coordinator we actually like for the first time, like ever, you know, since last year, but you know, this is not a Greg Roman offense anymore. His main competition for targets is Zay Flowers, who's pretty good, but we don't think it's like a superstar. And then after that, it's like they re-signed Rashad Bateman. They've got, for basically no money, they got Tez Walker, 4th-round rookie. Like, it's it. It's going to be Andrews and Flowers. It's Andrews and Flowers. Their running back's Derrick Henry. He's not going to catch a bunch of passes. I mean, to get Andrews in the 5th round, to pass on Andrews because I have so much and I actually need a little bit more McBride and Kincaid. You know, that is crazy to me. I truly cannot believe we're doing this. Like, this is one of the best tight ends ever. And we're just like, yeah, I don't care. I'm annoyed with kind of how the last few seasons have gone at elite tight end. I'm not going to take this guy. To me, Andrews is one of the keys to the season, but it's like, it's not just him. It's like the fact that you can get Kelce in the 4th. I like McBride. I like Kincaid. I like these other tight ends. I think we're gonna look back at these tight end prices and be like, we got frustrated with how the position scored, and we completely mispriced it the following year.
I could not agree more. We're a half hour into the summer, and we're on the first thing we completely and utterly agree about Mark Andrews. I can't stop clicking that button. I don't plan to stop clicking that button. It doesn't make any sense to me. I agree with everything you said. What I would add is, like, from the market, but you know, from what we've been discussing here, your point about their playing a different position is so important. And I think I want to elaborate on that because from a fantasy angle, they are listed as tight ends, right? Durham Smythe plays the same position as Mark Andrews on the depth chart, technically, right? And they thus get, they have to do this from a CBA perspective. We have to bucket guys for we can't, right? Jimmy Graham tried to do this, and these guys tried to petition. I'm sure Taysom, is although he's way overpaid, but
yeah, he's doing fine.
He's doing
just fine,
right? But he probably did have some backdoor conversations about like, well, I'm also a quarterback, so that's what got him. I'm not. Right. Don't pay me as a tight end. But even amongst tight ends, there are different positions. But from a fantasy we just lump them all together because what else are we supposed to do, right? Like I'm not going to call him a big slot or there's no sense in that. But Mark Andrews is not the same kind of fantasy asset as, again, I know I'm using Durham Smythe because it's a easy example, but even Hunter Henry or Jonnu Smith or Kyle Pitts certainly does. We use that to back Kyle Pitts. Maybe it was a bad thing, but Travis Kelce doesn't play the same position as these guys. George Kittle plays closer to a traditional tight end, but he almost plays his own little position amongst the elite tight ends, where he is much more of kind of that inline guy, but he's a yak guy, and they scheme things up for him. He's a superstar. He might be the best actual all around tight end.
What Kittle does is like a couple times a year, he plays the position we want him to play all year.
Yes,
and he plays it out of his fucking mind. And then we are like, all right, it's that week.
Yeah,
but
it's the 9
a lot of
for
times he doesn't play the
3.
right position. Yeah.
He has the 9 for 150 and 3, and you're like, oh my god, this is what everybody's running around. This is what I drafted George Kittle for.
Yes,
you got to deal with a lot of 3 for 33-0 weeks, but still, he's playing a different position.
Particularly from upside, right? Kate Otten is
that's a great one.
Kate Otten is out there blocking dudes. He's doing his assignments. They trust him. He's out there all the time. Dawson Knox, another guy, like he's just this guy. He fills the role. Every role has every tight end. Every team has tight end plays and a tight end position in their playbook. You need to do the squiggle. Can you do the little squiggle route? A lot of guys can do that.
Can you back up? Motion across the formation, right, and then run to the flat, right?
Yeah,
because we're gonna run fake zone read. You're over here. We got to cross it, right? It's like they're all doing the same thing.
Yeah, but like it's Will Dissly. Can you block a dude? Can you come off the block and run a little route off of play action, that type of stuff. There's lots of guys who can do that very well, and that's important to NFL teams, but it's not what Mark Andrews and Travis Kelce are doing. It's just not. And that's, I think the thing with elite tight end and why it's been a pretty powerful strategy for the last few years is that we are really good at predicting where the spike weeks are going to come from. Like we're as good at that as almost anything. And I think this is why. It's because like literally it's as if like we got to pick 4 wide receivers a year and assign them a different position. Yeah. And they played alongside like, they played alongside like Will Dissly. Like, how did we know that, Justin Jefferson was going to outscore Will Dissly? I don't know. I guess we're just really smart. Like, no, like these are receivers. These guys play receiver and like most of these dudes don't. And so we're able to draft them, put them on our team and just we all know, that they have a much higher chance of actually hitting our lineup with the spike week. So it's like tight end spike week separate less than other positions. That's actually true. You're not getting this huge separation of the position. It's just that we know where they're going to come from because they come from the guys who play the position that the other guys don't play. So like now here's the other thing about tight end. They all get hurt, right? Some of these guys are going to bust. Mm-hmm. And so generally drafting a tight end early doesn't feel good. Because like Kyle Pitts burns you, like Travis Kelce stops playing down the stretch. Mark Andrews breaks his ankle. Like all this stuff piles up. And then you're like, what was the point of this? This sucks. This has blown a hole in my team. But kind of it's like these guys play this position. It's not always easy to predict who's going to stay healthy and actually crush. But like, okay, we've got like 5 injury prone wide receivers playing this position and everyone else is basically just blockers. Those 5 injury prone receivers are still like the fact that the other 4 might get hurt makes the one who doesn't that much more powerful. So now we really know you're talking week 16, and there's like one of the injury prone wide receivers left. It's like, that's probably the guy who's going to have a spike week. It's probably, we are all going to be much more excited to play that guy, in DFS than some random, Kate Otten type dude. So I think that's, to me, I'm looking at it, and this is where I think, why am I sometimes passing on Mark Andrews? It's because I'm taking Dalton Kincaid. And, it's because I'm taking I've already taken Trey McBride, and I want to just bet on Andrews, but like, that's wrong. It's wrong to do that when I think these other guys are also really good picks, because it is a volatile position. As much as I think it provides an edge, it's volatile. We tend to see injuries at it. I think sometimes you kind of need all the things to come together, right? Like when I talk about what makes Mark Andrews have the awesome season, it does probably involve the Ravens defense being a little worse. And, it involves Zay Flowers not being like a true target hog in his second year. Like those things could happen. They could be like a dominant defense and Zay Flowers is the man and Mark Andrews is not a great pick. But it turns out that Dalton Kincaid is the number 1 wide receiver on the Bills with tight end eligibility. So you want some of him. Like, I think spreading out these bets a little bit among the early tight ends, but attacking the elite tight ends starting in the 3rd, going to like the 7th, it feels like a no-brainer to me.
I couldn't agree more. I would also add that this is a great example to me of why the market conversation is so important and contradicts maybe what we have seen in recent seasons, where people may say, let's look at what was effective last year, what was effective the last couple of years, let's pull the BBM data and say, right, how did those people win? Well, it was a lot of late tight end, but it's very individual driven, both on the miss side of the elite tight ends, as you mentioned, right? Mark Andrews breaks his ankle, Travis Kelce just has a down stretch, George Kittle's spike weeks come in week 7 and not week 17, et cetera, right? Everybody get Kyle
Kittle's the one I actually do understand the most of. Like, I'm just not doing it with Kittle, guys. I'm like, okay, that's fine. I get it.
Yeah,
I am.
It's
but
frustrating.
Like, I get
yeah.
it.
It's totally frustrating because you're like, I just spent a 6th-round pick on this guy and I have to suffer through these 4-point weeks so many times. But then I'm telling you, that one Monday night game when he goes nuts is the absolute greatest feeling ever. But it's a combination of that, like you already said. And we've had, specifically last year, I mean, Sam Laporta does what Sam Laporta does. It's like, and Dalton Kincaid wasn't amazing, but at his cost, when Dawson Knox was out for a stretch there, he was really, really useful at the tight end position, more so in like PPR or tight end premium. But still, we have had guys popping up from the later rounds. Hunter Henry keeps doing it and keeps going late back there, so I do like him yet again as a tight end 2 option.
Yeah, I like Hunter Henry now. Yeah,
we've had guys, right? Jake Ferguson last year pops up now, is going in the 7th or 8th round or whatever. We've had guys emerge from back there, and I'm certainly not saying that can't be. We just said Hunter Henry, right? Whoever you like back there, we all like Ben Sinnett. The steam on Ben Sinnett is getting a little out of hand.
Yeah, it's a little steamy there.
I love Ben Sinnett. He's awesome, and I thought I was ahead of him on ADP. And my God, I quickly fell like 2 rounds behind.
If you haven't updated your ranks within the last hour, you're not ahead on ADP.
I said in the Discord, I'm like, I think I got to go back every hour, like set an alarm for every hour to move him up a few spots if you want to draft him. He keeps rising, but also the Laporta effect is happening to Ben Sinnett. So Ben Sinnett can't become Sam Laporta anymore because everybody said, well, he's my only option to be Sam Laporta. So like this, from a market perspective,
so much worse tight end. Like this tight end class is like crazy worse. Like
there's basically no rookies other than Brock Bowers, who landed in a bad spot, and he's not going to get that cheap anyway. I like Sinnett fine, but he's already steamed through the roof to where, like, it took Laporta a long time to reach the prices that Sinnett's at already. And there's no one else really, Jatavian Sanders on the Panthers.
And I would say Sinnett's much more likely to be like a Musgrave than he is a Laporta.
100%. The Musgrave Kraft situation would be more of
that's what it feels like to me. Which I want to take him. Even at those steamy prices, I still want some. But like, he's not as good a prospect as Laporta. He was my tight end 2 before the draft. I like Sinnett. He's just not as good of a prospect as Sam Laporta.
No, they're not even in the same stratosphere of prospect. In my he's not even in the same stratosphere as Michael Mayer, and maybe Michael Mayer stinks. I don't know.
I know.
But like
I think
even
Michael
Mayer
Mayer is a
last
better
year,
prospect too.
even Mayer last year, I know he did not hit, but also he did come on down the end and earn the, he did what we hoped he would in terms of earning the role. Maybe he's not good enough. Maybe the offense wasn't good enough. Aiden O'Connell definitely isn't good enough. I don't know, but there was so much there that I guess Isaiah Likely is something to consider, again, from a market-based perspective. If something does happen to Mark Andrews, we can get an elite tight end back here, but you're basically taking on a zero and a projected basically zero for the whole season. It's just that the market is not giving us
from us
to the wide receiver point about like now it's a different game than it was 3 years ago when we did the 2021 chip chasing episode. The tight end thing has changed too. It's not just wide receiver, right? It's kind of, we've gotten tight ends are getting pulled up from the back if they're intriguing, but the elite guys, we've moved them down a tick, which is like, that combination is like, well, if the running backs are down, right? Wide receivers are up, elite tight ends are down, but late tight ends are up. I want to live in that Andrews, Kittle, right, Kelsey pocket, because that's where the most value lies, even though it's not the cheapest prices.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, last year I was hammering elite tight end, but I also had a bunch of Sam Laporta. I had a ton of Michael Mayer too. But I was pretty out on Turner.
Shout out Cole Turner. There was another. I swung on all those losers at the back of draft. Cole Turner was on my BBM finals team.
I love it. I wasn't really in on Kincaid. I thought he was kind of overpriced, but part of that was like, I can get Laporta later. Why would I take Kincaid now? But then you also, I think the Jake Ferguson part of that is also pretty important. Trey McBride, who I wasn't in on enough.
Oh, yeah.
I definitely sprinkled in, but wish I had a lot more. But there was kind of like, it wasn't just that the rookie class was really strong, which it was, and which we knew it was at the time, right? This is an awesome tight end class, was like one of the features of, the dynasty discussion. What do we know about this rookie class? It's super deep at tight end. There's a lot of really great tight ends. This is not hindsight analysis. We knew that. But on top of that, you've got the Dallas Cowboys need to replace their tight end. And it seems like it's this dude Ferguson, who we really don't know anything about, but he was in on a lot of play action stuff the year before, and he's probably going to get that. So he's got some tight end upside, and if he consolidates the routes, he's going to smash, which is exactly what happened. He started out with like a okay route rate, but was involved around the goal line, and then over the course of the season, he's like running 80% route participation. Absolute smash.
He led NFL tight ends in red zone targets by like 6 last year in the regular. This is just the fantasy regular season, so it doesn't count. Like, because I know it's a volume thing.
It's not even weeks 1 through 17. Game.
Weeks 1 through 17, he led NFL tight ends, but I want to say 6. It's somewhere in that range. So like Kelsey, Laporta, right? All these guys, he dunked on them from a red zone utilization perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I also think he's a really good pick this year, but like, you don't have. I mean, it's like, where is that? Give me that. I want the high end offense that has a big hole at tight end, and the guy is free in drafts. Can I get that? We don't have that, right? There's not like the clear second year breakout dude. I mean, like maybe Tucker Kraft is going kind of in the McBride range, where you're like, maybe he kind of dusts the tight end ahead of him and emerges. Like, that would be, but because Zach Ertz was still there. That's why I say Kraft instead of Musgrave. Like, I mean, I guess that's like maybe we get that would be kind of the similar play. Like, if we're just kind of trying to pattern match that one, that's the only one that comes to mind. But it's like, but I don't think Kraft is like that great of a prospect. He was solid. Yeah, he was solid. Probably worse than McBride though. And behind another tight end they drafted highly, not a Dusty.
Yeah, which I did like Kraft more than Musgrave. I found that
I did too.
Situation.
Yeah. Anyway, there are potentially some hits down here, but it's way trickier than it was. And letting yourself get to that point without tight end firepower you've passed on better deals than you were being offered the year before.
And we outlined from last year. I mean, what Trey McBride was the first pick of the second round, or something very near that. I know it was his second year last year, but very close to the beginning of the second round, right? Wins the Bolitnikov wins the Mackey. Sorry, Bolitnikov will be impressive. Wins the Mackey.
It really is a receiver.
At Colorado State.
Pick 55. He was 50,
okay. So I was a slight exaggeration. But wins, is the best prospect tight end player, not necessarily prospect, but he kind of was up there in college football. Like his efficiency metrics were better than Kyle Pitts, or like equal to Kyle Pitts essentially in college. I know it's Colorado State, but like this is a big time player. But like you said, Zach Ertz was there, so that's why he got priced down. And I'm not saying that was right, wrong, or indifferent. But these are the kinds of players that we found out. We found out it was wrong. And I feel really fucking stupid, honestly, for not having a shit ton more.
I should have had a shit ton.
I had 12% Cole Turner. If you're willing to take 12% Cole Turner, what should your Trey McBride exposure be? Like 50? This is a very stupid decision that I made. But like all that, right, is we just named like 12 names last year that were like, oh man, this is a pretty appealing situation. It was 2 minutes before we were like, I guess Tucker Kraft is the best one this year. So again, from a market, what does that mean?
There's actually probably an answer, and it's really gross.
Oh no,
it's Darren Waller if he doesn't retire.
Oh God, he is divorced now, so he has a little maybe more incentive to come back and to come.
I'm not taking him because I think he like literally is going to retire, and that's not something I want on my teams. But like, if Darren Waller doesn't retire,
you don't want to do Will Fuller. You don't want to do Will Fuller.
I don't want to do it again. I've been burned by drafting the guy who's probably going to retire. Is not worked out for me at all. This has worked out very poorly for me.
Oh God!
But
my chair just broke like Will Fuller's hand.
If Darren Waller doesn't retire, I mean that's a wide receiver with tight end eligibility available for free.
Yep, I have zero issues with that, but forgive me if I'm not running to the podium.
No, I'm not taking right
yet.
For Darren Waller, I'm taking him, but keep your eye on Darren Waller's status.
Yes, and we'll probably get to some of those. Keep your eyes on. Let's pivot a little bit away from kind of the. I think we did a pretty good job on the positional stuff, and we'll be talking about positional stuff as we kind of wade through early rounds to middle rounds, and like we've hit on some of this, so some of it doesn't need to be elaborated on. But from an early round perspective, let's just call it, first two to 3 rounds. Clearly, this is a situation we've never really seen before. The amount of wide receivers going in the first, certainly 2 rounds, but 3 rounds as well, is unprecedented. I believe I'm also going to screw this exact number up, but I believe it was from round 4 on, there are 6 fewer running backs going, like in total, right, from basically there on until like the 11th round or something. I don't have the exact specifics, but just assume 6 fewer running backs in the first 3 to 4 rounds, and from every round thereafter as we've ever seen, even in the last 2 years, which got very wide receiver heavy, right? People thought it was wide receiver heavy then. It is such a drastic jump even from last year. So like, how do we, I know we talked about wide receiver firepower and all that kind of stuff, but also, if you like Breece Hall, if you like Bijan Robinson, if you like Achane, how do you like approach the fact that, if you like Jacobs, whatever, how do we approach that when we understand all these things about the market?
Well, I mean, this is why, my site's called Legendary Upside, because I think that's how you attack running back in the early rounds. That's where it came from. And as I'm sure everybody knows, but it came from an article that I wrote about running back upside in the early rounds. We need them to have legendary upside because we can replace everything else at the position. And that's never been more true. You're betting on these dudes to break fantasy. And so you better bet on a guy who you think can break fantasy. And I think Christian McCaffrey, Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Devin Achane can definitely break fantasy. Achane's going to be more on like a weekly basis, kind of like he's maybe the George Kittle of running backs, but I think he can very much.
I like that take.
He can very much break fantasy for a week or two.
In a
And
world, I'm sorry, in a world where everyone comps people to the same race and the same size and the same, every white slot receiver is Wes Welker and Julian Edelman. A Devin Achane, George Kittle comp is quite refreshing.
I think it works. I think Jonathan Taylor, I kind of came around to where I'm like, in a kind of Achane way, he has that in him for a couple weeks. He's been not very efficient for the last couple seasons, and I think you have kind of some concern about Richardson stealing touchdowns, and they're not going to throw to him, and he definitely is like I'm a little less excited about. But you can talk me into Jonathan Taylor. I've kind of finally come around on him in the second round, but I'm a little squeamish about it. When you get to Saquon Barkley, is this dude going to break fantasy, or is he going to be like Miles Sanders plus a little extra from 2 years ago? I think very much more likely to be Miles Sanders plus a little extra. And now you're already in where you can probably find some of this later. Like what are you getting out of this that's not replaceable? And not replaceable in like the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th rounds. I mean, these picks are starting to get, for $4 in an auction league, you're replacing what someone else spent $24 for or $34 for. It's a big deal. It's a really big deal. And so to me, it comes down to talent at the running back position, which I think for a while people were kind of gotten away from the idea of talent at the running back position because it's like, well, it's really just about volume. Talent doesn't matter. As long as they give them all the touches, then, we're good to go. And I just think that couldn't be more wrong, especially as this environment moves the way it's moving. If I want to get touches and I don't care about talent, then I should draft Devin Singletary in the double-digit rounds because he's going to get a bunch of touches. Like we're now to the point where we're paying exorbitant prices for offensive quality. That's what you're paying. If you're drafting Josh Jacobs, in my opinion, you're just paying for offensive quality. You're paying for the Packers, not the Giants. That's all you're really paying for.
Saquon.
And yeah, Saquon. And I think Jacobs to me is the perfect example here because you're looking at a dude who was really inefficient last year. He had really bad. The NFL Next Gen rushing stats, which are my favorite for running backs, he had minus 86 rush yards over expected. He had a 35% success rate. Let's just compare him to his new teammate, A.J. Dillon. A.J. Dillon had a 37% success rate, minus 64 rush yards over expected. Dillon was actually slightly better on a per attempt basis. He just happened to have less attempts, and so he generated less negative rush yards over expected. I mean, literally, Josh Jacobs was A.J. Dillon on the Raiders last year. Now, moving from the Raiders to the Packers should improve his efficiency. But if you're giving me a guy who was producing A.J. Dillon efficiency last season, and I know he had a great season 2 years ago, but he's already kind of over the hill of where we expect running backs to peak in terms of their age because they peak very young. They peak normally on the rookie contracts. This is a dude who's franchise tagged. Now he's on his second contract, coming off a super inefficient season. These is kind of classic dead zone red flags, talking about coaching staff who doesn't really want to use this guy as a workhorse. Oh, they paid him all the money. Did Matt LaFleur pay him the money? Or did some other dude pay him the money? Now Matt LaFleur is going to use him. He's talking about Marshawn Lloyd.
I was just about to say, you can't even make the projectable volume argument that strongly because they drafted Marshawn Lloyd because the same people that will make the Jacobs projectable volume thing will knock James Conner for them drafting Trey Benson. And it's like, I agree. I'm also knocking James Conner for Trey Benson, but you can't do differently for Josh Jacobs. It's the same goddamn thing.
You're talking about A.J. Dillon's 2023 efficiency and an Aaron Jones role in the third round. That's potentially what we're looking at. That's the downside here. Not to say he can't prove me wrong, but that is what you're risking. And it's a lot to risk, in my opinion.
It's Mike Davis, isn't it? On a maybe a little better offense. Remember Mike Davis on the Falcons? It's like everybody gave him all the work because Mike Davis was at least good the year before. Josh Jacobs was 2 years ago, but there was this perception like, oh, and then we make the
Mike Davis was a straight up scam. He was just a PPR scam. So in fairness to Josh Jacobs, he did have an awesome season.
Mike Davis was the first NFT. Let's be honest, of all time.
Yeah.
Top
Yeah,
Shot was created. Roham created Top Shot after he drafted Mike Davis in the 4th round of his best ball leagues. 100%.
In fairness to the running back bros, I wish I had drafted Mike Davis and avoided Top Shot instead of the opposite. I avoided Mike Davis.
My Darius Garland momes are not doing so hot. I would have rather pissed away that on.
I'll trade you, Mike Davis, bros. But yeah, I mean, that's, Josh Jacobs had a great year 2 years ago. He's on the Packers. He could get all the work. It could happen. He could pay off. But this is a dude who peaked at a level below what we're really looking for, a 3rd round price tag. His best season is still, you'll take it, but he's never had a legendary season.
Right.
And now, he's coming off a really inefficient year, joins a new team. The usage might change. Yes, it's a much better team, so that's good. But you're paying a lot. You're paying a lot for that. And if I want to make the same bet, why am I not taking Joe Mixon in the 6th? Why? Like, that's the same exact bet. It's 3 rounds cheaper. And you can keep playing this game until like the 12th round. That's where I just really struggle with, like, if your argument really boils down to he's going to get all the work and he's on a good offense, it really boils down to he's on a good offense, because I can find guys who are going to get all the work to, you can make that case for like Gus Edwards. You can make that, Devin Singletary, Alvin Kamara, Aaron Jones, like Zeke. I mean, literally, like, if you don't care about talent and you just think he's going to get all the work on a good offense, you should have a big bag of Zeke.
Do you have Zeke's next gen? Because it probably looks not that different from Josh Jacobs and AJ Dillon, and he may not have qualified.
No, he did. So he had that's a great one. So he had minus 71 rush yards over expected. Again, okay. Josh Jacobs had minus 86. Zeke was at minus 0.39. Jacobs was at minus 0.37. So identical rushing efficiency to Zeke. Now, the big difference here is consistency. Consistency is important, right? Success rate, how often you're generating a positive run. Zeke was much more efficient. 42% success rate. Josh Jacobs at 35%. No, I know you did. And that's how I set it up. Zeke was he was consistent because he can still hit the hole. Nothing happens afterwards. So Zeke was actually potentially might be more efficient this year than Josh Jacobs, because he was last year, guys.
And your exact argument was, if we're drafting Josh Jacobs, we're drafting him for projectable volume and for situation. What team does Ezekiel Elliott play for? The Dallas Cowboys offense is even better than the Green Bay. Well, maybe not in the playoffs, but the Dallas Cowboys offense is at worst is the same as the Green Bay Packers. So there is, like, again, there's a longer track record. He's younger. Look, I'm not going to sit here and stand for Zeke as a football player. I also think he's terrible, but those things are all, again, from this market-based assessment, you can arbitrage running back with projectable volume, in a good offense, like you said, or just running back with the projectable volume, or right, one of the two or both are available to you later. So to your exact point, if I'm going to dip in and sacrifice potential wide receiver firepower, sacrifice maybe Josh Allen, sacrifice maybe Mark Andrews, when I'm going to do that, he better be able to break fantasy. And like, I think people think of Josh Jacobs 2 years ago as breaking fantasy. He was excellent for an 8th round pick. He did not break fantasy.
He's actually an example of what we're talking about now.
We're trying
to find Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs was a lesson in, when a guy falls to the 7th round, we need to be more lenient and we need to be more open-minded. So that's where, am I railing against taking Alvin Kamara? No, I think Alvin Kamara's fine. I think it's a little gross. I don't like doing it. He's a fine pick. He's a totally fine pick. Aaron Jones, totally fine pick. Joe Mixon, totally fine pick. Ramondre, yeah. These guys are not dudes that I'm going to go, I'm not going to make a big stand against these types of running backs, because they are properly priced at that point. I think that's what Josh Jacobs taught us. He sort of taught us where the dead zone ends, is really what Miles Sanders, same deal. He taught us where the dead zone ends. He didn't tell us chase these profiles up into the 3rd round, because he did it 2 years ago. He said, that what the lesson was, once it gets to the 6th round, even, we should start to think about it differently. we should start to think about it differently once the opportunity cost at wide receiver changes. Right.
So
And
that is so true. And I love the Miles Sanders addition there because people will just think about Josh Jacobs and Miles Sanders. And honestly, here's how dumb I was. I didn't dip Jacobs was a meme. We did a lot of shows and Josh Jacobs was the guy when you're streaming a draft. It was like a fucking joke to see how far we could get him to fall in
because
drafts.
we were biased against him and we pushed him down and then he crushed. And that was silly. That was us. That if you want to say we jumped the shark on anything, it was not taking running backs in a range where running back hit would have been super.
The whole strategy that we outlined that we said was the best was gifted to us on a platter, and we
said not this guy.
And we just said no, I know, but we said IKB, I know, I know better. Which again, to this whole conversation that we're having here today, is such a perfect part of all of this. Actually, both on the wide receiver side of things and on the running back side of things, in this market-based assessment of there's this huge group of elite wide receivers. I want them all. This game is so hard to win, right? You just mentioned Tank Dell. You're the best player evaluator ever. You drafted 100% Tank Dell. Guess what, buddy? You were right and you were wrong, and you lost and you didn't win. Last year in best ball. Maybe you didn't lose your money, but you certainly didn't win.
We could draft in week 13 and we would lose these games.
100%.
We could redraft. We get to draft in week 13. Everyone else has to draft before the season. It'd still be hard as shit.
Exactly. Go if you want to try that out. DraftKings does weekly tournaments every week leading up until the playoffs. I think they might stop in week 15. But so you can legitimately do the best ball thing where you play 1 week of the regular season in week 14 or whatever and go on through the playoffs and DraftKings and tell me how hard it is, because it's not that easy. But the absolute beauty, my favorite part of all of this is how difficult it is to find those right players and not only be right, but kind of be right twice to the tank thing. I got to be right that you navigate this gauntlet of a season. You're good at football. I might need to be right 5 times. You're good enough at football, right, to get out there. You get out there, you get the opportunity. The team gives it to you. Maybe you're in a good enough matchup, right? This is Kyren Williams was the sickest parlay in the history. Kyren and Puka were the most absurd parlays we've ever seen in fantasy. To be good enough to do it, then to get the matchups, and then to get your in week 17, Kyron's team stumbles onto the 1 yard line three times, and he gets the rumble in. Like
your quarterback doesn't tear his Achilles on like the 5th snap of the year.
Yeah, exactly right. Like Brees hit to the point where he's now a first round pick, and he ran so bad, and he ran so unbelievably bad. So think about all the things that we got to do to get right. The game is so hard. I love when the market just says, you don't really got to be right about anything other than this market assessment, which is like the easiest part to me. I think if there's a part of this best ball and fantasy football generally, everything we've talked about here, where it's like, no, like you said, do I want projectable volume? Devin Singletary, buddy, round 11. You know what I mean? Like that's available to me. Both of the Bengals running backs are cheap. The non-HN Dolphins guys are cheap, et cetera, right on down the list. And I can identify that, and I can identify where the elite tight ends are and where the elite wide receivers are. And I could just say, I don't got to do anything crazy. I don't got to solve world hunger here. Just draft elite wide receivers. Maybe occasionally I dip my toes into HN or Brees or whatever. And then I utilize this pocket that they've given to me, and I don't have to take a stand on really any of them to some crazy degree. It's like, that's where all this stuff comes together, where we're going to talk about diversification, right? We're going to talk about player takes. It's like, if I can remove all those levers that make it even harder on myself because the market just handed me something, like I want to take that 10 times out of 10.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point about the diversification part of it, because it's such a rich pocket of running backs kind of in that, round. It starts to get interesting in round 6 to me, but then it really picks up in like round 7, 8.
Mm-hmm.
And then, it kind of dries up though by, like round 11, it's starting to get shaky. So, or it's last call anyway.
Last call, I like that.
So, yeah, I mean, like in years past, you kind of start to feel like, man, my season's really coming down to like, if I get these kind of 3 running back bets right, because I'm drafting a ton of these guys because they're the upside profiles that I like in this range. But I mean, You've got the 2 highly drafted running backs are both sitting in this range, Jonathan Brooks and Trey Benson. You've got a bunch of guys that are really interesting, like Chase Brown as a second-year bet. You've got like kind of some of these boring starters. You got my favorite guy, Jalen Warren, who's just, you want to talk about efficiency. I mean, this dude's efficiency is off the charts, and no one cares. No one cares. They don't pick up Najee's 5th-year option. No one cares. They, like all the signs, they bring in Arthur Smith. There's going to be more than enough rushing attempts for a 1A, 1B type situation. No one cares. He goes in the 90s.
Tyler Allgeier and Cordero Patterson smashed in a Marcus Mariota-led Atlanta Falcons offense, and we have Najee, Jalen Warren. They really upgraded the offensive line, and they have Justin Fields and Russell Wilson, and nobody wants these guys. I'm drafting you. I agree. I prefer Jalen Warren, but I'm just it's again to the diversification point. Like, you can give me a chance to get the Steelers starting running back in round 8 and 9. Like, I'm just going to keep doing that. Like, that sounds fine. I don't have to make a mega strong bet. If I'm placing my chips, do I want a little more Warren? I do personally. But like, if somebody said, I just would rather do Najee, right? Mike Tomlin and Arthur Smith, this is going to be their guy. He breaks tackles and all that kind of stuff. I would say fine. But like, also draft Warren, right?
If I'm drafting Najee Harris, he's underpriced, and I'm drafting Najee Harris.
Exactly. I went on a rant about this last night. I'm like, I think I shit on Najee for like 5 minutes and then drafted him like right after, because I'm like, I think he sucks, but this price is stupid.
Yeah, it's an offense that's going to be capable of running the ball, and it's going to do it a lot. And both backs are going in like the 80s or 90s. Seems good. I'm gonna draft those guys.
Bengals. I want to toss the Bengals.
Yeah, Bengals.
I know we both like Chase Brown, but I'm also drafting Zach Moss.
Another Najee sort of situation to me, where like
very much
I like the guy going second better, and so I'm not going to have as much Moss as I will Chase Brown. But like Moss seems fine. You're getting him at 95. That's fine. Sure.
Like, Joe Mixon,
he might be the starting running back on the Bengals.
He's probably is the starting running back on the Cincinnati Bengals, of which we've been drafting in the 1st and 2nd round, the corpse of Joe Mixon, for years. And finally last year in like the 5th round, I don't even remember because I never drafted him. But like, we've been doing this thing with Joe Mixon, who is no better than Zach Moss, for years, only because, again, to the Jacobs thing. We were paying the tax because he was once good, but also he's on the Bengals. But we're not going to do it now with Zach Moss and Chase Brown. And so I don't mean to keep beating this dead horse, but like, this range is so ripe with options where it doesn't, like, Pat and I have our favorites. We're agreeing on a lot of these guys. If you said, buddy, Raheem Mostert scored 21 touchdowns last year.
Cool, draft him.
and he's on the Dolphins and he's going in the 90s. Sure, sounds good. You love Jonathan Brooks. You love Trey Benson. You say, I don't worry about Trey Benson. James Conner every year is much better than we give him credit for. Zamir goes a little earlier, right? David Montgomery goes in this range, and like on and on and on down the list. There's 25 guys. There's like 25 guys here. Yeah. You can have your pick of the litter and Justin Jefferson and Nico Collins and whatever.
And I think like we're opinionated, and so we're gonna have feelings about, is James Conner actually underpriced with this, or overpriced with this rookie coming in or whatever. But like this is the spot where I'm trying to force myself to be less opinionated and just say, lean on structure. And like David Montgomery, right? I don't want to draft a ton of David Montgomery in my heart of hearts, because I think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to come take that job this year not completely, but like in a, kind of like Kamara type of, like, he's going to push aside Montgomery and be the clear guy in that backfield. He's just so much better. But Montgomery he's good at like the short yardage stuff. And we've got a Lions team that has very much a mindset of wanting to establish it. And maybe Montgomery just kind of has the role he did last year. And if he does, he's a pretty big value at this price. So like, it's more like if David Montgomery, he has to fall a couple spots, but then I'll take him, and there's a lot of guys, like, that's how I'm playing it in this range. Like, if I don't like a dude in this range that much, I'm still going to take him if he falls to me. I'm not going to let myself be like, oh, he's just like 6 picks past ADP, but it's gross. I'm not taking him. Like, no, I'm going to take like Kamara. I don't love Kamara, but if he falls like into the 70s, early 70s, like, yeah, I want to take him there. I want to get some exposure. It's a little cheaper than everyone else is getting. at a profile that could, this is an offense that's finally got, a Shanahan tree guy running it. Maybe it's actually a little interesting this year. Who knows? I don't think so, but if you're going to give me a little bit of a discount and fits within the larger structural landscape that we're talking about, I shouldn't turn up my nose. And that's kind of where I'm at with like Najee, Zach Moss. These dudes, they're not like my first choice, but it would be kind of foolish to show up week one with a big bag of some of these guys and none of the other guys when the landscape is telling us the pretty clear path is to be attacking running back in this range. I think the one way we could trip up is if we just miss the what's going to look kind of obvious in retrospect. Like, oh, Mostert just scored double-digit touchdowns again. You couldn't have predicted that. Like, he's probably one of the guys I like the least now. They drafted Jalen Wright, but like not having any Mostert feels kind of foolish, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. You're right. Zach Moss does the Joe Mixon 4-touchdown first half against the Panthers in week 17. And you're like, Chase Brown. Like, the other thing I was going to add is like, again, we talked about you can be right, but be wrong. The other thing can happen too. You can be wrong, but be right on these individual players. So we're right about Chase Brown. Actually, Chase Brown is the starter. He's the best guy. I mean, how many times do we have to see running backs go down and random schmucks step in and do well? And at the end of the day,
Zach Moss has a lot of contingent value. That's the crazy thing about Zach Moss. We were drafting Zach Charbonnet in this range last year purely for contingent value. Zach Moss might be the starting running back on the Bengals or the clear contingent handcuff. And in either case, he's well priced.
Like, that's what I'm saying. Tyler Allgeier, like, go down the list. 3 years ago, Tony Pollard was a 6th round pick as the handcuff and handcuff only, essentially. I know he did a little bit more than that year, but the premise was he's the handcuff to Ezekiel Elliott. And this situation is so valuable and he's so good that we have to draft him in like the 6th round. And I did a lot. And guess what he was? A contingent value bet, period. Basically, he popped a couple touchdowns here and there, but you needed him in the weeks when Zeke was out. That was the whole point. Like you said, we did it with Charbonnet. We did it with Allgeier. We did it with AJ. Remember, AJ Dillon was like a 6th round pick 2 years ago. Yeah. 2 years ago when Aaron Jones was going in the 2nd. Like, we do it with the contingent value guys all the time. And now we have a range where at worst, these guys are contingent value. At worst, they're contingent value bets. At best, they are the starting lead running back on good offenses, and nobody wants them. But so this is all of this is to say
potentially like a lead offense. I mean, this is the Bengals. Joe Burrow coming back healthy. They didn't trade T. Higgins. They drafted a really interesting outside deep threat in Jermaine Burton. Like, this offense could be awesome. And we also know that like
the defense is worse. The defense got a lot worse last year, to your Ravens point from earlier. Yeah. Like, they're not going to just shut people down on defense.
And we know that, like, while I think that talent matters at the running back position, like, probably, for a fantasy perspective, given the prices that we need these to find these superstar running backs. But we also do know that, from an NFL perspective, the Bengals can be an elite offense with kind of dudes who are, just not tripping over their
Samaje Perine.
Yeah, Samaje Perine would be plenty. So, I mean, yeah, I actually moved Zach Moss up a little bit because I was starting to feel like I just want to I want to play it through Brown, but like I want to play it through both. I want to play it through both. Maybe because, not on the same team, but
yeah, I'm. Somebody asked me that yesterday, and I was like, I'm going to sprinkle it because I can't come up with an awesome reason necessarily not to, when I think that they are like a flag plant situation. The Bengals backs are. So I think that there's merit in just a sprinkle of a little bit of both of them, but on the same team.
Just a sprinkle. Yeah. Just like we've seen this, sprinkle. The Devin Singletary, Zach Moss backfield in Buffalo, it was there was an answer. It was Singletary. And it's possible maybe there isn't like a true answer in this backfield and the sprinkle ends up being the way to play it. But there probably is an answer. I think the move is probably just to be overweight on both. On separate teams mostly. That's
my take too. I want to polish up running back really quick and then talk a little bit more about wide receiver, because we've talked about needing the wide receiver firepower, but we kind of haven't really talked a lot about some of the specific pockets, and then we can get out of here. Beyond this kind of sweet spot that we've identified right in the market at running back, I do find the later rounds at running back to still be pretty interesting. You mentioned the contingent value thing that I was going to piggyback off that. We have contingent value bets now far cheaper. Like specifically, why did Tyler Allgeier fall like 4 rounds this year to me? I mean, should he have fallen a little bit? Maybe, I guess, but I don't know. He was good next to Bijan last year. I used his score. I had the 12th place finishing team in Best Ball Mania last year. I used Tyler Allgeier's score in the finals, and Bijan was playing. Like, it wasn't like, I hit I used Achan's score because Mostert was out. I used Allgeier's score while Bijan was there. I know Arthur Smith is gone, but at worst, again, he's the handcuff to Bijan in a Kirk Cousins Falcons offense. Like, that sounds pretty good to me. He's free. Ty Chandler proved his worth down the stretch of last year. And
I like Chandler a lot.
At worst, I'm taking big old bags of Ty Chandler right now. I mean, Aaron Jones is not playing every snap on this offense.
Nope.
So like he
never has.
Ty Chandler's going to play and is at worst the contingent value bet on the Vikings. That seems fine to me. There's guys kind of in here also that, again, when we're discussing the market, it's not even just the round 7 to round 11 or whatever, which is the real sweet spot. But there's still trickles here out through the rest of the draft that I still think that there's great running backs to add.
I do too. I think that the thing with running back that I would say is like, so last night I was kind of pushing it. I was doing some Chihuahua drafts and sort of experimenting with pushing it really, really far. And I do think that, if you get to the point where like Chase Brown is your RB1, that's probably like a little too far, which is what I did in one of these drafts. No, Trey Benson was this running back room, Trey Benson, Chase Brown, Gus Edwards, Rico Dowdle, Jalen Wright, Antonio Gibson, Tyron Tracy. I actually don't hate that. But I do think that.
But we're sick. We're
sick. Yeah. Let me see what this other one was here. Where am I? Oh, here am I. Okay. This is the one I was thinking of. Chase Brown. Now tell me what you think of this, because I think this served a purpose. Chase Brown, Ezekiel Elliott, Rico Dowdle. So I grabbed both the Dallas backs. This also has Dak, CD, and Ferguson. So I did like a big Dallas thing. So Chase Brown, Ezekiel Elliott, Rico Dowdle, Marshawn Lloyd, Kamani Vidal, Antonio Gibson, and Dylan Laube. So 7 running backs. I just grabbed the Dallas backfield, hoping to get some points there. But it allowed me to go. I have CeeDee Lamb, Devontae Adams, Malik Neighbors, Tank Dell, Ladd McConkey, Christian Watson, who I got at pick 99, Demario Douglas, Dalton Kincaid, Jake Ferguson, Dak Prescott, Drake May.
Yeah, see, that's beautiful to me. It actually sounds eerily similar to, again, my best team from last year. My first running back was Antonio Gibson, who was going in the 1-teens, 115-ish, something like that. That's where kind of Chase Brown-ish. I know his ADP is actually a tick lower than that, if I am remembering correctly, but call it the same concept, where it's like a fringy guy who's probably going to have some form of a role, but like, is he the lead or is Brian Robinson the lead, right? Is it Zach Moss or is it Chase Brown? But we're interested in this guy. And then I love the Cowboys thing. Obviously you had the Cowboys, but like the specific archetypes of the guys you added to the team make so much sense when you really pushed it like that. And I think that's why it makes sense.
Yeah. I tried to get safety in the Dallas thing, which I'm already betting on Dallas with the Dak stack. So I know Dallas is going to be an awesome offense. So I just grabbed both backs. And then I took a bunch of swings with, Chase Brown, Antonio Gibson, kind of the pass catching number 2s, and then 3 rookies in Lloyd, Vidal, and Laube. So kind of swinging for the fences that I hit some legit upside at the position that way. Now, I guess I was going to say don't do this, but actually maybe like this. But this feels like old school 0 running back builds, but we're paying way cheaper for them. Now, the problem is that we've missed this pocket. We just talked about how great this running back pocket was. I basically skipped the whole pocket. Chase Brown, I picked at 118. So
the last guy.
I got the last guy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Instead of getting 3 guys in that range, I got 1, and it was my first running back. But it allowed me to take Jake Ferguson stacked with Dak. It allowed me to take Dak at pick 75. It allowed me to get Christian Watson as my wide receiver 6 at pick 99. And so that's kind of how I spent those picks that, I might normally spend, like, so let's say 2 or 3 of those on a running back. and feel really, really comfy at running back. I pushed it, and I don't know. I kind of like it, but it kind of depends on this Dallas double up being somewhat viable, especially if you're already stacking Dallas. So maybe it's a unique thing, but this is one where, maybe it's akin to the Josh Allen thing that we talked about earlier, where this is like, it feels a little thinner. I've now sort of boxed myself out of some of the real obvious values, but you can, I think, still, it takes a little bit more luck. The right guy's falling to you, a little bit more skill, feeling comfortable about exactly how to construct these. But I think you probably can push running back to this level of thinness, even in this environment.
Because you still did capitalize on certain areas of that pocket. You just didn't hammer it to the extent where we're like, if I really had my druthers and I go into every single draft, I'm getting 2 or 3 guys in that range, right? Like, give me one of the Bengals guys, give me Warren, give me Chase Brown, or give me Devin Singletary or whatever. Like, I'll go to battle with those 3 guys, right? Like you said, Trey Benson, whatever. Pick your favorites. I don't give a shit. That's like the biggest edge from like how I could combine all the people in that little pocket. But that doesn't mean, right, if those guys are severely underpriced, we just talked about these other guys, like we talked about Zeke and Dowdle. We talked about Chandler and Allgeier and Antonio Gibson, who's also another, has a role plus contingent value on the Patriots. Like, those guys are also too cheap relative to what they've been. So I think they are not as big of values as the kind of that other pocket, the earlier pocket that we've talked about. So, but that doesn't mean that you can't do that. I imagine if Christian Watson wasn't there at 99, that you would have taken.
I would have taken a running back,
a running back right there. So I think it's a little bit of a unique case. And then I like adding Lloyd to Christian Watson to add a little Bengals. Clearly the Bengals are on my mind. A Packers secondary thing, right? Which is another little small thing.
I like to do
that people don't think about, that I do constantly. It's also a huge perk of the Draft Hacker. Good thing I did the promo before and not just now, but it's an awesome, huge perk of the Draft Hacker is like, if you've drafted Christian Watson, Marshawn Lloyd pops off the screen at you because he's, whatever color you choose to highlight your correlations. It's like, hey, dum-dum, you got Packers on here. So if you need a running back right now, Marshawn Lloyd probably makes sense. And those little things are huge. I added, again, I'm just referencing this team, but you did this on your BBM winning team. I drafted Jalen Waddle in the 2nd round, and I had a 0 running back team. And so I liked HN anyway, so it's not like it's that big of a deal. I could have had him. But I add it's a Lamar, Zay Flowers, Jalen Waddle team, right? And so when you are a 0 running back drafter and you get to the HN range, it's like, it's flashing at you like, dude, you need to take this guy because his name is lighting up. The week 17 matchup is lighting up. There's other stuff lighting up on your screen. Like, this is probably the guy that you should take. And so I add HN. I wouldn't have done anything without HN on that team. And so it's just those are little things to do, but within.
No, I think it's like you're betting on a team to be good. You're betting on an offense to put up points. I think that's the correlation stuff. I think you almost can overthink it in terms of like, what are the chances that like Marshawn Lloyd and Christian Watson are going to score points together in the same game? How correlated are they really? We're projecting out a game, and it's like, dude, we're projecting out a game in December. So you really just want a good offense. Like, what the chances go up if the Packers are really good, right? The Packers stay healthy. The Packers, Jordan Love is the guy at the end of the season, not the guy in the middle of the season. Like the correlation is like much simpler than like, it's just that like Lloyd has a good role, and Christian Watson's healthy. You need that at the player level, but the Packers are good. The Cowboys are good. Like, do you really want both Cowboys running backs paired with a Dak double stack? Well, if the Cowboys are really fucking good, you do.
Yeah.
That's honestly just the bet that I'm making. It's not like, this hyper precise, like, because it can also be different weeks. Like, it can be that Dowdle takes over the backfield. Zeke's useless. He's completely washed. Dowdle's actually the guy you needed. Great. I paid nothing for Dowdle. That's awesome for me. I don't care about the Zeke 0 at that point. Then I've got, Dak blows up the double stack week 15. They ride Dowdle to victory week 16. I show up in the finals with that stack because, they ping pong the weeks for me. So, you can do it that way, but I think that's even like more specific than it needs to get. Like we're betting on this offense to be good. A lot of these offenses are going to be catastrophically bad. Like there's last year's Texans and there's last year's Panthers, and they were going in the same range of drafts. You could easily backstack the Texans last year. You could easily backstack the Panthers.
Patriots.
And
if I had $1 for every fucking Patriots shitty stack I had at the end of drafts, we wouldn't be doing the show because I wouldn't have needed my best ball winnings.
That's exactly right. So you're just betting on like Texans good. That was the winning bet last year. Texans good.
The great thing is it encapsulates several of scenarios where you can win. They don't even have to be so like George Pickens, right? Ended up being a great pick because he hit at the right time, and then he happened to fit on some little thing. Right? Maybe you had him with Najee. Well, Najee, George Pickens goes nuts in week 16. Also, you could have used both their scores in week 17, but George Pickens goes nuts in week 16. To your example of we can kind of ping pong some things around and create. We talked about last year, like manufacturing leverage. That's what you're talking about. I can manufacture and tell this story of this situation, how I guaranteed myself some leverage just based on adding the right pieces together on the right offenses. But also it can just be like, the Packers don't even have to be good, but I don't know, maybe they get into a good week 17 game, right? The matchup is good, or their defense stinks and they give up a bunch of points. And the next thing you know, they're slinging it 50 times. Maybe they weren't even good picks the whole season, right? But it just so happens in that. But pairing all that stuff together is like, I now have access to these 4 scenarios where I win if they happen. I don't care how it happens, but if it does, I win.
And the Texans one, we talk about Tank Dell a lot, and Noah Brown was also a hit, and then Stroud obviously was the big hit. Nico Collins we're taking a little earlier, but he was a pretty strong pick as well. But Devin Singletary was sitting right there too.
Yeah, huge hit also.
Huge hit, and it's just like Texans good. That was the hit. Texans good. Also Pierce bad.
Damian Pierce bad.
But like to me, I mean the one I'm doing with that is the Patriots. Because that's my favorite one. There is another one, but the Patriots, you can do Ramondre, who's well priced, but you can also do it with Antonio Gibson, and you can start it late. You can get Gibson, really? Jalen Polk, Javon Baker, Kendrick Bourne, KJ Osborne, Hunter Henry, and you don't have to get all these guys. You can just kind of get a few of them. Grab May. If I get boxed out, that's like the first thing I'm thinking about. The other one that I would do, and I would recommend doing this one more without the quarterback, is the Giants. Daniel Raz pointed out that Daniel Jones has injury guarantees in his contract, similar to Russell Wilson last year. And so if they're not making the playoffs, this could be he gets benched to not trigger injury guarantees for next year. It's like $23 million for next year. So it's probably he gets benched at the end of the season in like most likely scenario at this point, I would say.
I'm agreeing with you on a player with bench risk. What does this show become?
Well, it's Daniel Jones, so it's a little easier.
A little different.
But they have Drew Lock as the backup, and they have Brian Daboll as a coach. And a lot of these pieces are cheap, and I'm taking Malik Neighbors. So if I've got Neighbors, you can grab Tyron Tracy. You can grab Devin Singletary. You can get Darius Slayton, Wandale, Jalen Hyatt. Unfortunately, you don't have the tight end that's draftable right now, but maybe we get that once. Like Waller is going to make a decision at some point, and then we'll know if we can just write him off entirely and take maybe DraftKings stabs on Daniel Bellinger or something.
For sure.
But he wouldn't be draftable. I don't think a non-Waller tight end would be draftable on Underdog. But that so that's a little bit weaker than the Patriots part. Plus, we're not drafting the quarterback, so I don't love the Giants one, but like you can get a bunch of pieces of the Giants offense for basically $0, and it's just you're just betting Giants good. Now, I don't feel as good about the Giants being good as I do about the Patriots being good, because it really just comes down to Drake May is good. Which I feel better about than Daniel Jones being good. But it's a well-coached team, and they just added Malik Neighbors. It's possible that Giants not bad pays off nicely when you're paying like $3 for 3 different pieces of the offense.
I'll toss the Broncos into
one.
into that conversation. I've said.
Are you taking Bo Nix?
I haven't taken him yet. I might have taken him once or something on DraftKings, but you know how it goes on DraftKings. It's always a little bit of a crapshoot with the quarterback thing. But I'm open to taking Bo Nix more so than Daniel Jones. To your point, I would be.
I agree.
If I had, if something happens and I have to take Bo Nix in a draft, it's fine. And it's the exact same thing. I don't think there's anybody in the top 100 on the Broncos, and I don't love Sutton. I'm kind of pretty lukewarm on Javonte, but we could include those guys. And then there's McLaughlin and Estime, and
it's
Troy
very
Franklin
easy to
Mims.
see how Sutton in particular hits though. Like,
oh yeah,
Mims didn't do anything last year really, except he flashed early and then couldn't get on the field more. And then Franklin went in the 4th round. I liked Franklin pre-draft, but like he's a 4th round receiver. It's a 4th round skinny speed receiver. Sutton could dominate.
He played with Bo Nix in college, don't you know?
Well, listen, I'm a different version of me is into that argument, but this version of me thinks it's ridiculous and we should draft Courtland Sutton.
I have no problem with Courtland Sutton. It's just I'm often the running back range thing that we were talking about. Am I going to forego Steelers running backs or Bengals running backs or Trey Benson or whatever to take Courtland Sutton? It's a little bit of that, but I also don't want to be so stubborn as to if I'm making this Broncos case. So this is, again, talks about like the draft IQ thing. And what I always like to call like drafting back to front, and it has to do with my portfolio and this market conversation, is when you understand the market, you don't just like, I fire into the draft and it's like, all right, Bijan 1 and Ayuk in the 2nd and whatever, and like you're just flying by the seat of your pants, and you're like, oh well, I took Bijan, so let's take Pitts, and I took Ayuk, so let's take Kittle, and it's like that's not wrong to take those, but I'm always trying to make sure I'm thinking ahead to what's at the back of the draft. Like, what do I like at the back? What am I trying to get more exposure to at the back? This specifically came into play once my dumbass realized Kyren Williams and Puka honestly were a thing. So what I was doing was basically every single draft, I tried to take Kyren Williams, Puka Nacua, and Tutu Atwell was my bet. I was just like,
that worked for me.
It was fine. I mean, I sacrificed Tutu to the gods. Not a great not a lot of meat on the bone. They would prefer.
Somehow they accepted. It was surprising, but they did accept
of the 130 pound wide receiver. But it worked, right? You get Kyren and Puka on teams, or one of them. If somebody gets sniped, you get the other one, because Kyren was steaming a lot by this point. But that was my plan. I said, I know going into every draft, I want Kyren, Puka, Tutu. So what does that mean? Well, it's like, okay, I'm definitely taking a running back there. I'm hoping to take a couple of wide receivers back there, so it informs your other picks. And so that's kind of this market conversation. Hopefully that's what it, more than like you like Chase Brown like we do, or you like Jaylen Warren like we do, or you like Denver or the Patriots or whatever. It's like going into the draft and like I said, back to front, knowing at the back, I got these things I want to try to accomplish at the back, or I like this, instead of what happens so often. And it certainly happened to me for years. You do your draft, and then it's like by the time round 15 gets here, you're like, shit, you're totally scrambling. You end up you're like, well, I guess I'll toss Braxton Berrios onto this Dolphins team. And it's like, but you didn't like Braxton Berrios. There was never a reason that you wanted to draft Braxton Berrios, but you were just like, I didn't have a plan for the late rounds, so I screwed it up once I got there. And then you look back and you're like, I got 6% Braxton Berrios, and that could be Kyren, and that could be Puka, and that could be Tank, and that could be early Laporta when he was going so cheap. That could be Trey McBride. And it's like, if I was more intentional about it and thinking about those later rounds and thinking about the cheaper stacks that I wanted, or even if I didn't want it, knowing I had that available to me if the draft played out a certain way is so much more important than really just about anything. And you have to understand the whole landscape to get there.
Well, what does jump out to you in the late rounds? Because given that the tight ends feel weaker, I think the quarterbacks, we start to run into real job security issues.
Yes.
And so that's not my favorite way to go there. The really late running backs, you start to flirt with zeros. And it's a deep wide receiver class. among the rookies, but most of the guys I want are gone by the 18th round. So it is sometimes I'm down there and I'm like, I guess I'm going to tack on, whatever kind of boring receiver to kind of fill out a stack, or, a third tight end that I don't really need, but, this dude might catch a touchdown or something, but I'm trying to avoid that, to your point of like trying to think it through ahead of time. I'm trying not to be in that situation, but there's not that many guys right now that jump out to me as like clear smashes, which I suppose is probably one of the features of drafting in May, is that we feel way better about some of the pockets early in the draft than we do about the very late rounds, when we're going to know things like this team's resting this dude with the starters, like we did with Kyren.
Right.
And I was like, oh, well, then he's one of the best 18th round picks available very clearly. We don't have that information yet. We'll get that in training camp and stuff in the preseason. But who jumps out to you?
I'm trying to buy into the Kyren thing is always, we use that as an example because it's just a good example of what the total ceiling outcome can be on a running back, right? in these spots, it can be this total uncertain situation with a Pat Thorman said yesterday to me on Twitter, like called it like the fragile starter. And that's what Cam Akers was. It was like, we projected Cam Akers to be the starter, and I don't think that was wrong, but it's clearly a very fragile starter. Like if we're projecting the certainty of, is he the workhorse relative to other workhorse lead backs, he was up there on the least confident and on that scale. And so I don't think there will be another, right, to the who is this year's Kyren Williams question or articles that you'll see here over the course of the summer. The answer is there isn't one. But what can we glean from that situation? And I'm trying to lean into those uncertain and fragile backfields. And so a couple that have popped up. One to me that honestly I've been totally ignoring that I find fascinating is San Francisco. We have all of a sudden, and I did it too, I have like not taken him. We've just said, no, it's not Eli Mitchell anymore. Right. It's totally not Eli Mitchell, even though it's been Eli Mitchell for multiple years. And look, I'm not a moron. I see why. I see that they drafted Garendo. I see, Cody Schrader is there, and I like, I'm kind of partial to him, whatever. But like, could it absolutely just still be Eli Mitchell? And what Shanny does is draft running backs every year because he drafts running backs every year. And now we're getting the Christian McCaffrey handcuff at pick 200. That seems pretty good to me. And so to this point, you mentioned like they could be zeros. I need the ceiling to risk. I don't want it to be, let me just look at the list really quickly. Like Alexander Madison. I'm not interested in taking the Alexander Madison plunge to risk what could be nothing when I'm going to risk in May, which isn't honestly inherently what we're doing. If we're drafting guys back here, even the quarterbacks, even the tight ends, it could be nothing. As we've seen with Will Fuller and Leonard Fournette and Julio Jones, like even then, once they sign, they still are kind of the walking dead. It's not a
CLV on Julio Jones.
Yeah, you got your CLV and you didn't technically get a dead roster spot, but like I'm calling it the Walking Dead. It was the Walking Dead. They were on the team, but they were not helping your best ball team. That's probably what a Madison could be in an upside case. But like, would you be totally shocked if Audric Estime is the starting running back for the Denver Broncos? Like totally shocked.
Not by the end of the season. Yeah,
like,
not by the end of the season.
Like shocked, yeah. But like if he just wins that job eventually, would I be shocked? No. Absolutely not. If Eli Mitchell is the handcuff to CMC, no. Or you say Garendo. Okay, you don't think it's Eli Mitchell, take Garendo. Or you're super duper crazy, take Cody Schrader. I don't really want to do the Schrader. I think that's pushing it too far. But these are the types of situations that I want to lean into. A second Colts running back is not being selected behind Jonathan Taylor. I'm pretty passionate that it's Evan Hull.
I think it's probably Evan Hull. I'm not really drafting him, but that's like on my list. And I saw you had the point about Kyren of like we should have been quicker on Kyren. I tend to agree. Like I actually, so this is going to seem like a brag, but I actually don't mean it to be. We did in ADP chasing, we do like our risers. We at the end of the episode we pick our risers, and I picked Kyren Williams as my riser, and it was in I think July. It was pretty early, and I ended up feeling I was like, I'm such an idiot. What was I thinking? Kyren Williams, and it wasn't until like 3 weeks later that I was like, oh, that was the right answer. But I questioned it because like there wasn't any buzz building around him really in the fantasy community. We kept hearing this drumbeat of like, but like he's unathletic. I mean, he's really unathletic, like he's undersized. Like, what's really the upside, right? Yeah, you've correctly identified an RB2 on an offense that we weren't that excited about. I think they were one of those teams that we were all kind of happy to like stack late, but they weren't like a priority offense, and they were pretty cheap. They're coming off this bad year. Stafford can't stay healthy, right? These narratives get set in stone that are completely wrong.
Van Jefferson stinks. Kupp is getting injured already in the summer, and Stafford can't stay healthy. And Higbee, it's
all kind of falling apart, Mm-hmm. And
is Aaron Donald going to retire and Sean McVay is going to retire? Right. It was a lot of negativity for sure.
Yeah. So I think to me, the thing with Kyren is they started telling us that they really believed in this dude, honestly, in 2022. And then he got a high ankle sprain. So we'd heard it for a year, and then but then in the spring practices and early on in the summer, we were hearing we really like Kyren Williams. We should have believed that, I think, and been more aggressive about attacking that. I do think though that kind of like sitting out Kyren in May was totally fine. Like, and in the same way of like Evan Hall, like and maybe like I'm just not maybe I'm being too risk averse, but like I would like some confirmation that Evan Hall is in fact the number 2, because there are like running backs is a situation where you can sometimes like learn names, like it's not Evan Hall, it's some other veteran that's bounced around and you didn't even realize they have, like Jordan Wilkins or something. Like I don't know who's on the depth chart right now, but like it could be
a name, Jesus.
Right? It's like, oh, it turns out it was Jordan Wilkins. That's weird. Or who's the dude they had a couple years ago that was just like catching passes out of nowhere? But it's like
there have been so many dead corpses out on the field playing running back for the Indianapolis Colts over the last couple of years.
So it's Trey Sermon who's listed number 2.
Trey Sermon, Tyler Goodson, Deion Jackson.
That's what they have. They have Trey Sermon, Tyler.
They just cut Deion Jackson.
Yeah, they cut Deion Jackson. Deion Jackson was the guy I was thinking of, but
this is how deep in the weeds I am on Evan Hall, by the way, that I know that Deion Jackson just got cut at the beginning of May.
I didn't realize he was back with the team, because remember they played him 1 week last year and he was so bad that they cut him.
Hall and Deion Jackson were splitting so JT's out, right? Zach Moss was out with the broken hand, wrist, whatever he broke at the beginning of the season. And so Evan Hall was the starting running back for the Indianapolis Colts, but he was splitting with Deion because Deion had flashed a little bit before in his career, particularly as a pass catcher. And so they were kind of splitting, and then Evan Hall gets hurt in week 1. He's out for the rest of the season. But then Deion was so bad that they didn't have anybody else, and they were still like, no, we still can't do it with Deion Jackson. And that's when the Tyler Goodson, Zach Moss came back, obviously. Tyler Goodsons, and they bring Trey Sermon in. That's how bad Deion Jackson was.
Yeah. So that my thing with Hall is I kind of want to wait. Until I know, and then if I know, I'm going to be more aggressive than I was last year, even with Kyren. I do think it took me too long once I had the information with Kyren, but I do think we want to wait for the information, because otherwise we're really risking zeros. One dude that jumps out to me a little in this range is D'Onta Foreman.
Mm-hmm.
He's on the Browns.
He's a great one.
Jerome Ford, not very good. Nick Chubb coming back from this devastating knee injury. It doesn't sound like we should expect him to return to the form that he had previously. Now, it's a little front weighted. The production is likely to be front weighted with D'Onta Foreman, but you're paying so little for it that I feel like
we're also wrong about that all the time. Like that's something I've tried to make sure I don't over.
When it's free, right? When it's free.
Like if I'm drafting a guy in the second round, I can think a little bit more deeply about what does this mean. But in the 18th round, like we don't know. Like we could be so wrong about, is he the week 1 guy until Chubb gets back, or maybe Chubb gets back and gets hurt again, and it is back weighted with D'Onta Foreman. Like D'Onta Foreman has actually been back weighted production for several years. On the Titans, he was back weighted, and he was like middle weighted this past season. It's so all over the place that it's really hard to predict. Even with the logic makes total sense, right? That they'll not rush Chubb back. Foreman makes for a good fit in weeks 1 through 4 or whatever. But we did that song and dance with Samaje Perine, remember? Like, and sometimes it's just nothing. And sometimes it's late. James Conner's best weeks were at the end of the season last year, and nobody would have predicted that. So it's just so chaotic. I try not to overthink it, especially as you said, when it's the last round.
Yeah, and I think in general, like it's a weird time of year because I think if you're swinging for home runs, it's okay, but they better be home runs, and that's where like Kamani Vidal, I get it. Like I think he has a high risk of being a total zero because he's a 6th round pick.
Yep.
I mean, he could just straight up be on the practice squad all year. Like that is
100%.
a very realistic possibility, and people are chasing him up. But I just shared a team where I drafted him last night, so I'm open to it. But it's just because, like, look, I mean, this dude could be a James Robinson. I mean, it's clearly Vidal. That's it. It's a wide open backfield, and he looks like he literally looks like James Robinson when you like go watch him. Like he doesn't have any long speed, but he's fairly versatile, really strong, kind of lower body. Can kind of get up to speed. What he has, he gets up to it fairly quickly. I don't think his 40 was actually that bad, but he gets caught from behind a lot.
He is. It is disgusting to watch. I mean, honestly, though, that's how I felt about watching the Kyron highlights. I was like, watch the first couple seconds, right, and then turn it off, and then
all his highlights cut right when he goes through the hole.
He makes the guy miss in the hole or whatever, and then spins on the safety, and then the backside linebacker catches him down the field. And you're like, oh god, that was gross. But everything up until that point, right, and then the pass blocking and the pass catching, and it's like, you can't have. It's similar to like a lot of the structural arguments that we made. It's like you can't ever get, if you're going to get everything, that's Breece Hall. Like there's a reason why you cannot have everything in the 18th round pick. And so we have to pick and choose where we're willing to weigh the risk versus the reward, the certainty versus the uncertainty, right? The offensive situation versus the profile for whatever. You're going to get, like, let's just say there's 5 things we're looking for in these guys in the 18th round. You're going to be lucky to get 2 on any of them that you feel good about, right? And so, how you weigh those is up to each individual person. As you mentioned, I am more open to the zero risk, right? The like, I don't care as much that I don't have as the information that he is the backup. If I feel a little more confident than the market does that he is, and then like people are willing to attack closing line value on Leonard Fournette. Why can't we attack closing line value on these 18th round picks? Certainly it could go worse. It went worse. It went really bad for Leonard Fournette and for Will Fuller and for, it goes bad on both sides of things. So I just want to, again, it's just like, you're going to get maybe 1 positive or 2 positives about these guys. And so you have to pick and choose which ones you're going to prioritize.
Yeah, I think so. We had we announced and had a podcast with Shady Advice that he's joined us at Leg Up, and he had a really, I think a helpful phrase: "Don't drop the baby." Of kind of when you're building these teams and you get something that kind of falls in your lap value wise, then now your job is to basically finish that team and not ruin it. You've already been gifted an edge. Yeah. So this to me, there's a lot of that in these early drafts where like, I'm pretty confident I'm getting value on some of these teams that is not going to be available to people. And that value is probably occurring in, the 10th round, the 11th round, maybe the 12th, but probably my biggest edge is not the 17th and the 18th.
Speaking of dropping the baby, that was absolutely hilarious. That's an epic timing.
Yeah,
it's like we had a drop, like a.
I know. Drop. She's over here. I'm just poking her, so she. the value, So I think to me, I'm a little bit more into the idea of who are the singles that I can find. Who's going to give me a single in the late rounds that is just going to help me finish up this team. But now at the same time, I am open, and probably more than last year, to the idea of who's the home runs. And I do think Vidal could be a legit home run. I think Tyron Tracy could be a legit home run. And I'm trying to take those guys and be a little bit more aggressive. But like, Luke McCaffrey, I'm into Luke McCaffrey. Like very much a single double type of swing.
Yep.
Jalen McMillan, I'll take some of these these rookie wide receivers that are available.
It's Javon Baker for me.
Javon Baker I like, although
it's my favorite.
I get sniped on Baker a lot. He's
right.
True 18th round.
He's rising. I'm going to be going right back to my Malik Washington in every draft here because Javon. I've lost my everybody else is
about Odell Beckham.
Yes, exactly. That's gonna be the whatever the shining example of aren't you worried for me is like, aren't you worried about Odell? If I was worried about Odell Beckham, then I never should have drafted Malik Washington one goddamn time or mentioned his name ever. If I was worried about Odell Beckham. But
very fair.
To your point, I think that one way that you can a couple of people on the Discord make fun of me because I use the phrase have your cake and eat it too, but this is a good example of trying to do that. If these if you lean on rookies, generally speaking, you kind of can you can lose that zero risk and gain that upside. It's not 100%, and running back specifically this year is a little funky because it's a lot of 6th round picks, and 7th round picks back here at the running back position, but certainly at wide receiver. I think there are some tight ends. I'm pretty interested in Eric All. We didn't get to him as a tight end. Like, it's just a last round guy. Like, it's Mike Gesicki is the roadblock, and we just waxed poetic for an hour about the Bengals.
They also drafted another dude, didn't they? Draft the Tanner
McLaughlin, from Arizona, but all went reasonably early, 4th round. I want to say Eric All
went 4th round, and then McLaughlin went 6th round, I think.
Yeah. So it's not exactly Musgrave Craft. This is the dollars. This is the dollar store Musgrave Craft situation, but there's little stuff like that where, sure, are these guys going to be like hits and helping my team? No, it's May. What is today? May 10th. May 10th, and I'm drafting fantasy football teams, and these are last round picks. All these guys are probably going to be useless, but there are ways I think that we can navigate it a little bit to where, like, this dude's going to be on the team. And he has the requisite upside that I'm looking for. It's tough, but I think that they do exist. And to the Kyren thing, the only reason I posted that on Twitter about Kyren was specifically because, and I'm talking entirely about myself because I was a Kyren stan. If you go back and search Eric Bine for Kyren Williams, there's shit from the pre-draft cycle where I was like, this is my RB2. Like, I was probably Davis Maddicking a little bit with hyperbole. But I loved him. Like, I loved him even with the athleticism stuff. I loved him as a prospect. And I was willing to dive into other uncertain situations, right? Like, I wasn't doing this, but the market was cool taking Deuce Vaughn was drafted in every May draft in Best Ball Mania. Deuce Vaughn. And that is an equally uncertain situation with a equally unappealing prospect who, yes, he has juice, but he's 150 pounds.
Right.
So he has his own flaws, right? People were drafting Zach Evans in the same Rams situation and I was doing some of this. And so I was just saying that I think it was just a little bit of laziness, not because we couldn't uncover Kyren, but because we wrote off a situation like Kyren and we were willing to dive into other situations that were basically no different from an uncertainty and lack of information perspective.
And my thing, and I got to get out of here in like a couple minutes, but
yes, me too.
I think my thing with the rookie wide receivers compared to rookie running backs is the rookie running backs, you're generally trying to swing for the fences a little bit more. And we're going to get more information. So you're going to have a higher chance of actually making contact and knocking one out of the park later on. The rookie wide receivers, there is some upside, as Tank Dell and Puka Nacua showed last year. There's quite a bit of upside. But I think there's also more safety of you're just now like Cedric Tillman and lots of these dudes can give us total zeros. So it's not like it's pure safety. But if you're just thinking about of these dudes remaining, who's likely to at least get on the field in the final 3 weeks of the fantasy season, rookie wide receivers are a pretty good bet because, a lot of these veterans are going to be benched by then. The fact that these guys haven't had to play football for maybe 2 months of the season is, lowers their injury risk for one. These are the guys who are probably coming up to replace injured guys as opposed to getting injured. They might be good, where some of these veterans are we're pretty sure they're not good. That's why they're here. So the safety of some of these guys, it might not feel like Javon Baker is a particularly safe pick, but he's not a bad bet to get on the field in week 16. You know, it's a lot of these now it's less fertile than it used to be because all these guys are getting priced up. But that's where like a Luke McCaffrey is not someone I've historically would have been super excited about.
Right.
But in this range, if I can tack him on in the 16th, 17th round or whatever, that seems somewhat appealing. Is like, I'm just making sure, like, you know, let's say I've already bet on Jaden Daniels. I'm just trying to fill out this team in a way that is coherent and is going to kind of generate points from the final spots on the roster during the fantasy playoffs. You know, and making a correlated addition with a rookie is just a very, I think, very logical way to kind of help protect the value that I've already secured by drafting this early, because I had access to picks
right.
that later drafters are not going to have access to what I already got.
100%. And soon we'll have this, you know, next week we'll have the schedule. So there's other little levers, you know, you can pull week 17 correlations. That's to just team level correlations, or week 16 or whatever, you know, whatever you want to do. Division, you know, you're the division bro. You can do different stuff like that. I think it is just to use our favorite catchphrase to put a bow on it, to close. And I promise we're actually closing this time.
We better be. I gotta go.
I know, me too. It is like kind of safety in the macro. Right. We talked a lot about the macro level market stuff. That stuff is like no individual player. Cedric Tillman versus whoever, Jalen Hyatt versus whatever. None of them individually have any more safety than the others. It's just that overall archetype has much more safety. You're going to, more often than not, you're going to have that safety plus the ceiling versus other archetypes that exist there. All right. We both got to go. Anything you got coming before we get out of here?
No, we said the plug, so we're good. We got you know, underdog rankings on the site, DraftKings rankings. Working on getting drafters and FFPC rankings up as well in the coming weeks. Some good articles rolling out on the site. I'll mention on Monday I had an article that's free on the site about a Central American tree that they discovered in the rainforest in 1965, and it's a best ball article, and I think you'll enjoy it. If you listen to this and you haven't read it, I would recommend checking it out. Totally free on the site. Also available for free on the Legendary Upside podcast. Wherever you get your podcasts, I narrated it. I think it's a fun concept, and just wanted to get it out there for people to check out.
I will plug that as well. I'll also plug maybe why this whole idea works is Pat and I use like outside storytelling type motivation.
You do, like, as well. Yeah.
Everything I do like kind of comes from like, I'm huge on one guy. I don't think likes me anymore because I talk about Moneyball all the time, but there's so many things from the Moneyball concept that are so applicable to this game that we play that I can't stop drawing conclusions from like everything that Brad Pitt says over the course of the whole movie, or quotes from the book. But other stuff too, right? Like I do a lot of business stuff. I'm really into like true crime and all this life hacking and all that kind of stuff. And the article will be framed just like Pat's is. It's about a tree, or it's about Tony Robbins, but actually it's a best ball article, right? Yeah, and so, but I enjoy that style of content. So if you enjoy those, there's lots of stuff up on Spike Week and on Legendary Upside, and that'll do it. That's the show. We will be back next week. Enjoy drafting. We'll see you guys. Peace.
Woo! Those were some spicy takes. Want to stay up to date with all of the other spicy takes we're going to have over here at Spike Week? Why don't you press that subscribe button below? You turn notifications on, we draft a team, boom, you know about it. We have another spicy take, boom, you know about it. You can be there. You can draft with us. You want to stay up to date? That's how you do it. All right, we'll catch you later next time here at Spike Week.